Good morning. I will try my best to prove this wrong. So, thank you for being here, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation. It really is an honor to be here among so many people interested in digital democracy. I've been an enthusiastic promoter of the digital revolution since I decided to abandon my career as international entrepreneur in the restaurant business, and I decided to start my own software company almost 20 years ago. I've also always been a passionate activist for democracy in my own town, Treviso, 40 kilometers north of Venice, organizing citizens in a battle against incinerators and for a better waste management. Yet, never would I have believed someone telling me 20 years ago that one day I would have had the chance to share with people from over Europe my experience in developing an operating system which allows anyone to take advantage of the power of digital democracy. Well, here I am, and I'm presenting you a digital tool which powers digital direct democracy in Italy. But let me first talk about a few things about democracy these days. Democracy is living a crisis. We have been hearing this quote for 10 or more years, and more so these days. The American vote on Trump or the Brexit are used more and more as arguments to support the thesis of the limits of the democratic system. Of course, problems with democracy are several. It has lost credibility. It has betrayed the promise to be the champions in guaranteeing peace and economic development. Politicians are seen more and more as intermediaries who betray the mandate they receive from the electors and who only take care of their personal interests. Subsidized information has been proved limited and biased and having used to justify wars to export democracy. Citizens are feeling more and more excluded for decision-making. Referendum results are challenged, and elections are seen with increasing preoccupation by the establishment. Politicians keep saying that democracy is complex and need professionals. We want to make democracy easy to use, accessible, efficient, and effective. I want to live in a democracy which is credible, where decisions are taken in a transparent way, taking into account the actual will of the citizens, and where access to unbiased information is granted to everyone. This is what I call direct democracy. The digital revolution that we are living is having an enormous impact on the way that we are looking at and we live the democratic system. Digital technology brought us greater interconnectedness, easier communication, access to information, capability to process data and interact with them. Digital devices operated like magic, at a click of the button. Say I would like to visit Paris. I click a button to my smartphone to book a flight. I click a button to have an hotel, to book an hotel. I click a button to know which the best places to visit are. I can use digital technology to travel, communicate, shop. Why can I use it to participate to the democratic life of my country? So, in Movimento 5 Stelle, we started rethinking the interaction between the citizens and the elected representatives. Why was there a need to rethink that? Well, because up to now, with traditional representative democracy, you vote for someone who might get elected, and then you lose any control on how he or she will behave from their own. You are only given a chance to change your mind after a legislative term, and the only options that you are given are whether to re-elect the same representative or bet on a new one and wish for the best. Imagine you are looking at a political talk show on TV. Have you ever wished to be able to correct a politician who is making mistakes while arguing on something that you are passionate of? Wouldn't it be great to have a button to click to decide the content of what the politician says, be it in a TV show or in the parliamentary committee meeting? How many times you have engaged in a passionate political debate with friends, defending a thesis and then felt frustrated because the elected people you have voted have taken the opposite decisions? Wouldn't it be great to have another button to click to decide in which way your representative should vote? How many times have you thought, oh, if I were there in the parliament, I would like this in this way? Wouldn't it be great to have yet another button to be elected to the parliament or the European Parliament? Impossible? Well, I can tell you that that button exists and I press it. And that's how an IT entrepreneur from Treviso got here today talking to you as a member of the European Parliament. I was elected to the European Parliament in 2014 by Movimento 5 Stelle in Italy. Movimento 5 Stelle is a young political movement founded in 2009 and aiming for direct democracy. We strongly believe that the digital revolution is dramatically changing society and the way we interact, and we should all govern and take advantage of this process. All 5 stars members can candidate themselves or choose a candidate to the elections, amend a piece of legislation being drafted by an elected 5-star representative, propose a piece of legislation to be discussed in the Parliament, decide how the 5 stars group of elected representatives shall vote on a specific subject, received education from elected 5-star representatives on how to serve as mayor of a city or how to draft a legislative report, decide to financially support only a specific project and to fight the overspending of public money. All this is made possible exploiting the power of digital, and it has been made available to 5 stars movement in the form of an operating system called Rousseau, under the name of the Francophone Genevan philosopher considered one of the fathers of direct democracy. Thanks to this revolutionary approach to democracy, Movimento 5 Stelle has been able to score 25% in the first national election that it participated to, electing 163 MPs. 21% in the first European election, electing 17 MEPs, and electing dozens of cities mayors and hundreds of members of city councils. According to the most recent polls, in just 7 years, Movimento 5 Stelle is now the first player in Italian politics. Movimento 5 Stelle has been brought to life by citizens fighting for a more just society, a sustainable economic development, and a satisfying social environment. Rousseau is our first rope launched to the horizon that will one day be a bridge that anyone will be able to walk on to go and discover the vast land of digital direct democracy. Thank you for your attention, and sorry for my English.
So, hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? I have a, yep, there we go. So my voice is a little bit croaky, but we're going to get through this. What I wanted to talk to you about today is CERN's social media. And in fact, I worked recently with some academics on a particular study where we looked at our social media and we looked at the impact it had on our audience and how the audience behaved. And we studied this and we published a paper recently. And I'm going to just give you some of the highlights. It was a paper, in fact, in conjunction with Aviv and Eilet, who were two academics from Technion in Israel. And I find the results very interesting, so I'm hoping that you do as well. For those of you that don't know CERN, I don't know if anyone doesn't know CERN, but we're based just outside of Geneva. You've got here the Geneva airport. You've got the Large Hadron Collider running 27 kilometers in circumference, 100 meters underground. And you've got here the Swiss-French border that runs right through the middle of it here, wiggles its way through. So we've got 22 member states, and we have people from all over the world coming and doing their particle physics research. And in fact, going from what CERN does to our presence on social media, this was the evolution of us on social media. We were one of the first laboratories, first organizations to be on YouTube back in 2007. In 2008, when we started up the Large Hadron Collider, we saw a need to be on Twitter. We began first in English, but because we're a bilingual laboratory, we also opened a French Twitter account shortly afterwards. In 2011, it was actually the Human Resources Department that put us onto Facebook first, because they saw a need for talent acquisition, that the young people were actually on Facebook, and this would be a good way to inspire them to come and work at CERN. Then in 2012, we created the role of social media manager. And this was a role that I had from 2012 until earlier this year, when I now lead the team of social media, website, and all of the editorial content. So in 2012, we consolidated our presence on Google+ and also on LinkedIn. And we later developed Instagram and presence on Reddit as well. And in terms of our social media strategy, we've got three aims of that strategy. The first one is, we're not selling anything. So what we're selling is curiosity and knowledge, and we're inspiring people to be interested in physics and the world around them. So one of the elements of that is to begin a journey. We want people to go and discover more about the science and about their understanding. We also want to foster engagement, the digital democracy. We want people to be engaged with what we do. It's a publicly funded organization, so we want that the public are interested and engaged. And we also want to retain positive sentiment. You can think of this as different themes. There's an educational theme, an engagement theme, and a pure marketing theme. And the beauty of this in social media is that you can measure it. We were looking at click-throughs, how long people stayed on the website, and also what did they share, what did they comment on, and the pure likes on social media. And it was the fact that we could measure all of these elements and tie it so closely to our strategy that led to the study that we did, the academic study. So this is a very busy slide, but it's just to explain what we did for the study. We had 8 weeks of data here and 5 social media channels. So we had Facebook, Twitter in English, Twitter in French, Google+, and Instagram. What we did for the study was looked at all of the posts where we shared an image. And we looked at how people responded to this. And in fact, there were 4 different types of posts. One of them were newsworthy posts, but there were also wow images, just amazing images from our archive that really just inspired people. There were images from our history, black and white images, and also weird images where people had to guess what it was. And there was always a link to find out more that they got after they'd made their guesses. What we found, in fact, was of the 214 posts that we sent out in that 8-week period, there were less than half were newsworthy. So this was another feature. It was looking at, do people respond to social media just because it's news, or is it the image? And we wanted to really look into that. What we found of those 214 posts was that 35 of them were what we classed as high engagement items. So the audience responded higher than what we expected. And this is, again, a very busy slide, but it's basically showing you that across that time, these were the audience figures that we had on the five channels that we studied. The largest one was Twitter in English. We had more than 1 million followers on our Twitter English. And Instagram was a very, very new account at that time. When we started the study, it had only 100 followers. But it grew enormously in the 8 weeks that we did the study. Like I said, we were using images. It was really something that appealed to that Instagram audience. In terms of the gender balance, you can see that, for example, Twitter French is almost 50-50 in terms of the gender balance. But the rest is what we see generally in the audience that follows CERN. It's mostly 2/3 men and 1/3 women. In terms of the top countries, I mean, US is so prevalent on social media, so it's not surprising that that comes out as the top countries. But also it was interesting for us to see the balance of countries on the other channels and to factor that in. And one of the things we studied when we looked at the 35 engagement items was that many of them were highly engaging across all the platforms. During that period was when we announced that Fabiola Gianotti was going to be the next CERN Director General. She's now been our Director General for almost a year and doing a fantastic job. And the audience were extremely engaged to find out that we were going to have Fabiola as our new director. This was a huge story on everything. But what was also interesting was some of the other things we didn't expect. So, for example, on Twitter, we were looking at our English account and our French account. Now, here, there are many people that speak both English and French. You'll know that one phrase in English it takes many more characters to say that same phrase in French. And so the challenge with Twitter in French is to get into those 140 characters. What we saw was that when we took a tweet in English, you could convey a lot of the information in one go. And people didn't really need to click on the link to find out more. They had everything they need there. They could share it, they could move on. But the French one ended up being slightly enigmatic. You couldn't say as much. People did want to click through to actually find more. And we saw that there were more click-throughs with the French equivalent posts than there were with the English, purely because you weren't saying as much because of the constraints of the platform. This is sort of a summary of what we found. So, like I said, we had images in every post, and the behavior was really across the board in terms of the effectiveness of those images. What we saw when there were news posts was that people liked it, they commented, they shared, they did click through, but they digested the information very fast and moved on with their lives. There wasn't an awful lot of long time spent on the website. They didn't click and continue their journey more. What we did find with animations was that this was quite a shallow engagement. People liked it and shared it, but they didn't really do anything else with it. One of the interesting findings that we've now put into practice at CERN is that when there was a video or a virtual tour on the web page, especially if it was further down the web page, so people saw a beautiful image, read some text, and then watched the video, they were much more engaged, they stayed much longer. They didn't, if the video was at the top, they watched it fast, they moved on. So we've actually started to change our website in this way, building on this study. Discussions, is obvious, it was a lot of comments. Clickbait, I mentioned. And with the tailored content and the human story, we really saw, for example, that when a French tweet led to a whole newsletter in French where people could click around and really explore different stories. It was tailored content for that audience, and that got a huge reaction. And the human stories really appealed to the audience as well. So we've actually used this to shape our content moving forward. But just to summarize, if you do want to read the final study, it's pinned to the top of my Twitter account, and there's also this, this short link here if you want to read it in detail. And certainly in the case of CERN, it has shaped the way that we've done social media, the way that we've done editorial content since, and the way that we are now redeveloping our website just based on these findings. So I've found it extremely useful, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here. Two fascinating talks there. One just blew me away in terms of digital democracy and what is possible, and the other, well, academic research. I'm suddenly feeling very inadequate because I want to get really practical with you, and I want to talk about kind of nitty-gritty stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis, and I want to see what we can get done in only 10 minutes. I want to look at 12 practical ways we can become more user-centric in the work that we do day by day. You see, digital has changed the world. We all know that. We know quite how profound the change has been, don't we? That people are demanding ever more, that our behaviour has altered, and that that's because we've got more choice than we've ever before. We're exposed to more than we've ever before. And we expect instant communication, don't we? We expect instant communication with our friends, with our family, but most of all with other organisations. We don't want to wait. We don't want to spend our time faffing around with organisations. And because digital has profoundly changed us, changed the way we think, changed our expectations, then we as organisations, whatever organisation we represent, needs to behave differently. In such a world, how do we meet these new expectations? How do we get better at listening to people and responding to their needs? It's quite a profound question that we have to answer. So I want to share with you just 12 practical steps of how we do that. Number one, we need to consolidate what we know. The first step in listening and responding to the needs of citizens is to understand them better. The chances are that there is a lot of information across your various departments, across the institutions as a whole, about users, about our citizens. Research that's been done before, but has ended up in a drawer somewhere. All that effort, all that knowledge. And then, of course, there's the experience of people that are interacting with citizens on a daily basis. The problem is that these are like pockets of information. They're kind of scattered and spread across the institution and organisations, and we need to start bringing them together to create a central picture of what today's citizen is like. Because what we think we know is no longer the truth. Just the makeup of this audience perfectly demonstrates that we are not representative of the complexity and diversity of the people we're trying to reach. And then we're going to need to start filling in the gaps. Because we're not going to have all of the information we need. We're not going to have a complete picture. And the trouble is that we have this tendency when we work in the digital field, we work with technology, that we sit in our little bubbles and we don't actually have a lot of interaction with real citizens, with real people that are actually using our services. And as we heard in this morning's talk, we need to actually go and spend time with these people. We need to interact with them and get to know them. Now, when there's a lot of user groups, that can be very hard to do. It can feel very intimidating. We can't talk to all of these different users. Our users are too diverse. But here's the key. Talking to somebody is better than talking to nobody. Too often we sit isolated because we're overwhelmed by the task. Get out there. Start talking to people who are using the services you're interacting with. Start learning from them. And beyond that, we need to widen that sample with data. You will get valuable stories. You will start to empathize with people as you talk to them personally, but that's not going to be enough. You're also going to want to gather data like we've just heard about. But I would advise you that when you start thinking in terms of data, that you go in with specific questions that you want answered. Because so often we look at things like analytics and reports and big data and that kind of stuff, and we're just overwhelmed. And we end up looking at vanity metrics, right? What our bounce rate was, or how many visits we had to our website. And those don't really tell you much about users. So go in with specific questions. Use data to drill into those questions. Now, it's easy to become overwhelmed with all this information. And the truth is that even if you get this really good picture of users, even if you get to really understand the people you're trying to reach, nobody's going to be interested. Nobody's going to look at this huge amount of information. So we need to take the time to start simplifying down those messages. If we want the whole organization to start thinking in a more user-centric way, to become more citizen-focused, then we need to start presenting this information in a much more compelling way. We need to use tools like customer journey mapping or empathy mapping. Simple infographics that we can give to colleagues a snapshot of what user needs are. Maybe we want to turn these into artwork. I've been around some of your offices in the past, and your walls are covered with important people shaking hands and impressive-looking buildings. It's all internal-looking. Your walls should be covered with citizens, with the people you're trying to reach. And empathy maps and customer journey mapping is a way of doing that. We need to start approaching projects differently, too. When we start working on a new service or a new project, we need to make sure that those maps are on hand, those users, those citizens are in the front of our mind. Don't let a project begin with a feature list or some internal goal. Instead, always start with user needs. What is it that the user will get from this project? What need are you meeting? Don't make assumptions either. Speak to users. Find out if the need that you're building for is a real one. Even consider including them in the planning stage. This will make sure that the projects you work on are relevant to citizens' needs and are not just vanity projects for somebody in the organization. We need to start prioritizing the projects we work on based on user needs as well. Unfortunately, we've all got limited resources to work with. There's only so many projects we can take on, and projects that actually fundamentally help users often get sidelined in favor of some senior manager's pet project. And that has to change. So we have to stop prioritizing based on who shouts the loudest and work with colleagues and with management to agree a framework, a policy for prioritizing what we work on. A policy that's built around user needs, not internal agendas. We need to be focusing content creation around user needs as well. Content creation often suffers from a similar problem to projects. It starts from the premise of what do we want to say to the world, rather than what does the user want to know? And that has to change. When creating any content, we need to ask ourselves two fundamental questions. What does the user want to know about this subject, and what should they be doing next? But as we create content, we need to be careful of edge cases. Another issue with content creation is that we become caught up in complexity. We need to ensure clarity if we want to clearly communicate with users. One of the biggest problems with government in its various forms is it's not clear and transparent in a way that people can understand. And this is often a problem with edge cases, user groups that have maybe a slightly unusual need, or a specialist user group that's unusual. Now, we don't have the luxury of ignoring these people, but we need to be careful that in our attempt to address their problems, we don't end up adding more complexity for the majority. So edge cases are something we need to pay a lot of attention to. We need to change the way we work as well. We need to build digital services around needs, but we also need to build them in a different way, in a new way. We can't run these projects in the same way as we've run projects in the past. Big technological rollouts or building a building. This is a fundamentally different thing if we want to be user-centric. Not if we want to include the user's voice in the process. We need to approach things differently. Instead of project specifications, we need to prototype. Prototypes that we can gather feedback from real users over. Prototypes that can then be improved and iterated on, instead of having these specifications that are set in stone and can never change. And we need to work hard to be cross-disciplinary teams. If we're going to work in this different way, then we can't continue to work in our silos. Because users don't think in terms of those silos. They don't care about our organizational structures. We can't carve up digital services between departments. Neither can we hand off users from one team to another. We need to start working collaboratively and forming cross-disciplinary teams. Because the customer experience, the user experience, the citizen experience spans the entire organization. And probably most of all, we need to get out of our website mindset. People of our generation, okay, people that maybe are getting a bit of white hair, we're obsessed with websites because that's what the majority of our digital career has been around. But when it comes to digital and digital democracy, it's about engagement. But a website is generally a broadcast mechanism, a broadcast platform. It doesn't allow us to listen or interact with users. Even something like a mobile app can't help with that. We need to use more user-centric channels and social channels, because social channels enable a level of interaction. But that means a more significant investment. An investment in manpower and resources to make these not just another broadcast channel where we push out press releases and news, but make them a customer service channel. A place that's for more than just announcements. A place where citizens can come and ask questions and get answers. But that's something that's got to be open 24/7 and have a global reach. So it will need investment. Finally, we need to become more user-centric as an organization. We need to redefine our own roles in order to achieve that. The trouble is we think it's our job, the people in this room, to deliver digital solutions, digital platforms, digital experiences. But do you know what your organization needs more than anything else right now? It needs advocates. It needs people who are going to try and transform the organization, that are going to become champions and mavericks. Because the truth is, even if you did the best job in the world, that's not going to create a great user experience, because you can't do it on your own. Neither is having a good team behind you going to be enough. The entire organization will need to change. And it needs you to get passionate and enthusiastic and want to bring about transformation. And I want to help you do that. So in order to do that, I've put together a kind of set of resources to get you started. If you go to boag.world/digitec, there's a whole load of stuff, including this presentation in video format and downloadable, so you can use it in other environments. It's got loads of further reading. And I really hope that you will grasp onto this, that you will become passionate and enthusiastic about bringing about change and becoming more citizen-centric. Thanks very much.